we communicate over text with a whole lot of residents now. And that is, I would say, one of the biggest differences because nobody reads emails anymore, right? Email's the new mail. You have so much of it, right? During this conversation, I bet I'll get 80 emails when I look at my phone again, right? That's hard to keep up with. But text, very immediate, right? And no one answers the phone either, right? So we text a lot. So if there is something, we had a building yesterday with a problem, 70 residents we had to notify. I could send them an email. That wouldn't work. We could wait for them to call. That wouldn't work. But we sent a text to them all, and that works.
It is a common saying amongst real estate investors that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. While this catchy phrase has value, it fails to convey how easy it is to lose money through poor property management. Whether you self-manage or hire a professional, it is important to understand how to navigate the common pitfalls and challenges with rental properties without losing your shirt or your mind. That's why you have tuned in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. I'm your host, John Stiles, real estate agent and team leader of the VIP Real Estate Group at Bridge Realty. As a current multifamily investor and former property manager myself, I understand the headaches and difficulties of keeping an investment property from becoming a money pit and time sucker. It takes a solid business plan, it takes tested systems, and it takes key team members to actually find success. So let's take a deep dive and maximize your property value. All right, welcome back everybody to another episode of Maximizing Your Property Value. My name is John Stiles. I am your host, and today I am pleased to have Curt Fluegel with us in studio.
Happy to be here.
Curt is the CEO of Invest Property Management, and he has a background in managing rental properties as well as being an investor himself. So Curt, why don't you expand on that? Just inform our listeners and viewers a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. There's a long story, so we'll give the short version, right? So I'm actually a software developer by trade. That's what I was. Sold a software company is really how it started. Once we did that, I took about a week off, told my brothers to quit their jobs, and we were going to do a high-end home theater company. That was around 2007, 2008. For those that know history, that is not the right time to have done that. So we started this company, we did well. We won some awards. It was cool, but nobody built houses. Obviously we're burning through cash, and someone brought up to me, hey, you should invest in real estate. So, you get out there, you meet people. They're like, this would be a great thing for you to do. And that's what I did. So I started out as what's called a straw man, right? Someone that couldn't afford the down payment. I was just their cash. I was told, I didn't know anything at this point, right? I'm just told, you just got to put the money. You don't even have to see the property. You never have to meet her. Everything will be fine. I think we all know how this one probably ends. She ends up going to jail for fraud. I end up with a home I never intended to have. And that was my first investment. So with that start, how can you not fall in love with it, right? So, but I did. I had the bug. From there, we started buying duplexes because now we're full into the recession. So the property or the home theater company technically never went out of business. It was Trican at the time, Trican LLC. Now it's Trican Incorporated, but it's the same company. We just kept it going, and big pivot from high-end home theater to purchasing real estate. So we did everything the hard way. So you'll hear all these great people of mentors and all that. I'm not smart enough for that. I just dive in and see what you can learn. And that's what we did. We kept buying duplexes. Then we realized my brothers are both more in the construction side of thing. My oldest brother, general contractor. So they would repair them, get them ready. And then we're like, oh, now we have to manage them. Smart person would hire a property manager. I'm not being that guy. We just did it ourselves until we learned what we were doing. And over the years, again, acquisition, sort of to where we're at now. And once you learn those things and then reach out, join organizations, read books, right, and get the knowledge on top of it, managing for others as well. And so now we have this sort of split business where I'm still an active investor, but we have a full-blown management company as well.
Okay, very good. And so with your management company, what would be your main focus as far as the geography that you service and type of properties? What's
Sure.
your ideal client?
Yeah, I mean, our ideal client is investor-based. With that said, we, like all of us, we started in single families, and we still manage a lot of single family, where you have a strong market of what we still call accidental landlords, right? They're not as savvy on it and all that. I'm all for those people as long as they want it to be an investment and want to learn as an investment. I love teaching that level of new investors and being a part of it, helping them understand the long game. That's really come back a lot, right? The whole thing about real estate, right? There is no get rich quick. That's not what it was ever built for. Has a lot of amazing advantages, but that's not one of them, right? And accidental folks sometimes, right, don't want to pay that $300 bill. They just want to get paid cash out of it. No investment, works that way, including real estate. So I do love that, but when you get to larger and larger investors, we'll manage all the way up to apartment buildings. What I own now is apartment buildings. So again, we're kind of split in the fact that, things with full on-site staff is something we work in, all the way down to single families and bank-owned, you name it. I love a challenge, so I have this, that core part of me. You heard how I just jump into things. I still enjoy a bit of doing something unique, and we'll usually do that.
Yeah. And so what areas do you focus in?
Yeah, so we're based in St. Paul. I think most of us in the Twin Cities work throughout it, right? I'm a broker in both states. I actually live in Hudson, Wisconsin, so we work on both sides of the river, as it were. If it's a fully managed property, like a large apartment building, then our geography goes very wide. I mean, we have stuff from Wausau, Wisconsin to Rush City, Menominee, pretty big area. So really throughout the states. But if it's a single family, the core Twin Cities market.
Okay. And when you say fully managed, what does that really mean? Is there like a certain unit, or you need to have on-site staff?
At least one on-site staff.
Okay.
Right? I mean, look at it this way. I can't send a leasing agent to Wausau, Wisconsin to fill a vacancy, right? And I don't, the caretaker model's a tough one. So once you're up to at least one staff, you can really manage remotely, right? We can work as a regional manager model to a pretty wide area, but there's got to be at least someone there that we're managing.
Yeah. What would you say would be the unit count to really budget and afford at least one on-site staff member?
Yeah, and that it comes down to rent prices, right? So that, like anything, it's like, well, it depends, right? The answer of everything in real estate, it depends.
Yeah.
But for us, we have some 70 units that make sense. I'm looking at a 60-some unit in Iowa right now, but the rents are high enough, and because it is a Section 42 property, there is staff there, and if the numbers work, I don't mind, traveling to Iowa once a month to visit with the staff. We work so much through video conferencing remotely. We use, we're paperless from day one. So we've always been built for that environment. So again, as long as there's one and unit count, lowest I've seen that really works is 60 and above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Very good. So as you have built up your property management company in-house and begun to manage for other people, what would you say is kind of some key characteristics of a good property manager?
Yeah, it's so much easier. I can tell you some of a bad property manager, right? But
that works too.
Yeah, well, it's like everything in life, right? The bar for entry isn't really high, right? To get your real estate license, we've both done it, right? It's not an impossible bar, and that's the minimum bar to manage for others, right? I mean, you have to work under a broker, but if you're not at least specializing in it, right, that matters. But it's experience and it's understanding. And our first time, we had to get our first client like everyone else, right? And you couldn't say, yeah, we manage for millions of others. We've been doing it for a decade, right? And you had to convince them. And they were a client for I think 8 years before I let them go, in all honesty, because it didn't match our priorities anymore, right? But it's important, right? And the skills, of course, it's a customer service job, and if you don't understand that, and it's a long game, right? So both with residents, right? Unlike traditional real estate, right? And the reason I know your background a little bit, you used to work more in that, and you don't. I tried to start a brokerage and decided that's not for me, right? They're not the same thing, and I'm not saying you can't do both. but you certainly have to understand they're not the same thing. So you want someone that really gets those nuances of, those residents are with you for at least a year. Successful for an investor is obviously everything over a year, right? That, we want at least 2 years in a single family, 3, 4, 5. You're really getting a good return. So that's a whole different game, right? And you got to be always thinking that way. So you're thinking I explain to every new person, property management is a whole lot of process, right? We have written, documented workflows for everything we do, and nothing ever follows it, right? Because every day something magical and fun happens. So you have to love both being very detail oriented, but understanding nothing will follow the plan. So it's a lot like life, right? And if you thrive on that, and if you find a property manager that thrives on that, they're going to do well. So I'm a software programmer by trade, but I'm also a religion major. That is a weird combination. Makes me suited for this, right? And maybe that's what you want to find, a software programmer with a religion degree. And I love employees that work for me with counseling or psychology background. Frankly, it's true, and I have multiple of that because it's a big part of what we do is people.
That's really interesting. I actually got a degree in intercultural studies.
Okay.
Which was very much like understanding how other people think, how other cultures operate, and so I always thought that it was helpful. It helped me to be patient with my tenants, my everything that was involved with the owners and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have to explain to people a lot. I'm like, we tend to make friends, and I know there's studies on this. The circle around you tends to be just like you, right? And and that can be good or bad or healthy and unhealthy, and that's why those studies exist. But if you're going to be in property management, you are going to work with a lot of people that aren't like you.
Yeah.
And if your reaction is they're dumb, they're wrong, they're bad, they're whatever, to me it's a big thing in this industry of if you ask what to look not for, that is super common. And if that's the way you actually feel and go through life, you're not going to do well, because the people I work for, the majority of them are not like me, and you have to thrive on that.
Yeah. It's really amazing how many different cultures there are. We tend to, like, if we just stay within our one people group,
right?
We have our own small world, and we feel like, oh, this is just how everybody is. But once you step out into the world, there's a lot of different ways to approach things.
There are, and so same thing. Your background is perfect, right? You're fascinated by that, as am I, and I feel to be in anything where you're really serving people. That's a key thing. I always say everything we do in our mission statement, all that's the core focus. And of course we know how to, we know cap rates, and we know growth, and I know what $10 times 100 units divided by a cap rate means, right? And all that's important. That's a base knowledge, though. You shouldn't play if you don't know that, right? But the success is the people part, for sure.
Nice. Well, I'm curious, as you've built your business, and obviously you started small, but it grew it. Mm-hmm. How have you divided up roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, it's funny for us, and what I've learned, and as I add my new role right now, which will be operations, right? Because I've done every role like any small business, right? So I've been the leasing agent, I've been the property manager, I've collected rent by hand back when we'd take cash. I mean, you name the story, right? I've done it once upon a time, and as you're trying to build something that will last, right? There's a lot that has to change, and for me, I'm always real honest with my mistakes. I've done that wrong 100 times over, and we have changed our staff and how we staff 100 times over. And we used to be primarily single family, which you look at one way, right? And as we're a lot more multifamily mixed in, the way you staff is different as well. So it's a bit of avoidance the question, but the reality is we're very low staffed as a company right now. So there's usually the argument in the single family world is always departmental. How do you organize, right? And we've generally we've always been departmental. So there's a short answer, right? I have a bookkeeper who's good at the bookkeeping, right? And my property manager, will oversee everything, not a portfolio-based model, right? We've never done portfolio, if that's the main thing of the question. But right now, that's the key. But I have different units now because of that community, that community, that community. And then the managed single families are one community as well. So in a way, we're a little more portfolio than I've ever been. And that's why it's tricky I'm in discovery of that still. And if you can't look back and rediscover, right, as a small business, right, we're 15 people. So you're constantly learning from that. So I don't think I directly answered, but that's because I've hired 4 people in the last week and some big hires going on right now. And, ask me in 2 months what worked and what we changed again. But,
Okay.
But generally I like a hybrid approach that everything in life isn't about, do you do departmental or portfolio, but it's somewhere in between, right? I never want someone to call and someone says, oh, only Steve knows that answer. That's the last thing I want. And that's the reason you can't go straight portfolio. But you also want relationships, which means if you have one person who's in charge of 1,000, they don't know anyone, right? So finding that balance is usually some sort of hybrid in between. I really want specialists, right? That, well, yes, anyone should be able to answer something. You talk to these owners every week. You talk to these owners every week, right? You need some kind of organization. So we're reaching out to people and talking to people, not when there's a problem, but when things are fine, right? That's important. It's important for as much for my employees as it is for them, right? If all you do is answer the phone to people angry at you, right? Because that's usually when you talk to us, it's not good for anyone, right? And if you truly believe in the people part of it, you want to be communicating with them more often. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to staff that. There's the reality.
Okay. Well, thanks for your honesty in that. Obviously, we know as business owners, things are constantly changing. You got to always course correct as you see how things unfold.
Yeah, pivot's a big word for me. I like it a lot, right? You can't be afraid to change because if the world's going to change either way. So you either change with it or you get buried. So.
Yeah. Very good. So I want to transition into the part of my show called Tenants Make Me Laugh.
All right.
And I'm wondering if you have any stories, sounds like you do, of times when, you've experienced something with a tenant, a vendor, or a property owner where it's like, this only happens in property management. So what comes to mind in that?
Yeah, and I was a little worried about this question. I'm not going to lie. I'd heard some of your previous podcasts on it, and for me, just based on who I am and how we're trying to run it, right? If you got me a couple beers in a bar, right, I might start throwing out some stories, but as a general thing, I don't enjoy it. Just like we don't use the word tenant in our company, right? It's resident. It's very important to me that we're not talking about them, but to them, if that makes sense. So I actually, all my peers are so into those stories and I don't like them. I've had stuff that, you start making jokes because you have to stay not crazy sometimes about the most macabre things, right? We've had everything, right? You get shootings, you get robberies. I had a building just flood the other day. It was one of my buildings, right? It's like, well, there went 30,000. And if you can't laugh at all of it, right, you'll go crazy. So I get the stories. And I've had tenants that do crazy things, but I look at it now, I'm like, yeah, that's because they actually have a mental disability. And I struggle to make fun of it, if that makes sense. And I don't mean to sound too, and that's what people accuse me of. It's like, I don't, it's just who I am. I don't want my employees thinking that way. I don't want me thinking that way. It's easy to do because, yeah, crazy things happen. I'm more better at delivering on my own mistakes, right? I've made mistakes due to trusting residents or doing the things that have cost me $20,000. I've lost a duplex over it to the city. Like I delivered a speech on it. They hated me all because I let a drunk move in and the crazy things she did, right? But I can make stories about her, but the reality is I felt for her. Now I know as a professional, I can't do that, right? That was in the early days, right? My own stuff and all that. But those things affect me differently, where I less make fun of it and how can we provide housing for everyone when some people just do the craziest stuff. And I have a fiduciary duty to my owners to not let crazy stuff happen, right? I look at it as a problem, and I know I wish I was actually trying to think of a story that would be funny traveling here, and I'm sure I have some. But right now, with what I strongly believe that's sort of against my peers in this, it's just hard for me to do, and I think that's the trick. I feel too much that we're pitting owners against us, against residents, against government, and then we're mad that the government does things. And I'm like, well, they're trying to solve a problem. You either be at the table or don't get mad at what they do. And I look at forums and I see people just saying they must be on meth and all that, and they're just saying all these things, and I'm like, maybe they are, right? But let's not just go there, right? And to me, I apologize for the non-funny response to what is lighthearted. And in the office, yeah, do we say things? Of course, right? We keep it light, but I struggle with that perception of, that they're the butt of our jokes. And most of our vendors, we have internal maintenance staff, so I'd be making fun of my brothers. I would love to do that, but I probably shouldn't. So.
Well, I really appreciate that answer, even though it doesn't answer the question.
I know. I feel I'm avoiding everything you're saying, which wasn't my goal coming. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And the intention of asking the question is, I think you appreciate it, is not to really make fun of them, but just to kind of highlight the fact that there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in the business, and you have to have a combination of some thick skin and a willingness to laugh even at yourself.
For sure.
So, maybe I need to work on the question a little bit.
Oh, no, and I get it, because we still at the office, every time something truly new happens, right? Because it lessens every year, right? Your first 5 years, you're like, oh my, that really just happened, right? And every year, now when it happens, it's like an event. It's like, now that I've never seen before, right? Yeah. And I wish I could top of the tongue come up with one of those, but it does happen. But now it's like, you hang out with peers and you've heard so many stories. I'm amazed still at 12 years in, all of this, all that there's still a story. I'm like, I've never heard of that happening, right? And it does. And that is, so to take it back, yeah, that's part of the magic of this. I'm a guy who embraces change, so constant movement and things like that. So I love the fact that something weird happens every day. And I'm pretty good at, don't take it personally, right? If you take things personally, you will burn out real fast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, why don't we move into the part of the show where we talk about relationship management?
Sure.
Because I think you've already kind of touched on it a little bit, that it's all about building relationships. And so when we're talking about customers, when we're talking about tenants, mm-hmm. again, on the one hand, we need to be enforcing the lease, but on the other hand, we want to be able to build communities, especially in those larger buildings. So what is your approach to customer service with tenants?
Yeah, so that to me is a huge one, right? And everything is I feel like right now I'm supposed to just know and have all this knowledge, right? But 12 years in, I'm still learning, right? And that again is half the fun. But is different everywhere. And for one that know your audience, right? So there are communities, right? So we're all different, but just like in my given buildings, right? They all operate a little differently, right? I have 3 large to me. There's 70 units and 123 units, but one's a 55 plus, one's a section 42, one's in a rural area. So they're very different communities, right? But they do have, some generalizations you can make about each group there. And then how to tie that together. Yeah, that's fun. I mean, I think you brought up the, how do you treat him and all that. And I've been working with some of the new employees, like what's the right word? And sometimes I want to say parental, but it's not. But you want this level of trust between you, but you want rules, right? And that's the biggest part. Like I say, did your parents ever get mad at you because you did something wrong, right? They still do. There were still rules and there were still consequences, right? Like we can treat people well, but there are still consequences, right? So if you don't, I really want us to be really nice to residents more than I feel I've seen out there. But will I evict you if you don't pay rent? Yeah, I have to, right? And it can still be that, right? Just understand it's not because you're and I wanna and I wanna bury you, right? Those are the rules, and we have to abide by rules. So I try to explain that way.
Let me dig into that a little bit. How do you communicate that? Because sometimes tenants will take things the wrong way and accuse you of accusing them. But how do you approach that?
Yeah, and it is still complicated, and I feel like people listen to this, and all of a sudden residents reach out. Yeah, but right, because I find myself not always, and I'm like, and it's back to where your training might even be better on that. I'm like, okay, they're not you. They're not processing this the same way as you. But there's two things. One, back in the day when I had a bunch of duplexes, East Side St. Paul, right? We dealt with the normal stuff, right? Where I had all the stories of, $8,000 in damage on every move out, it seems, right? I've had times where, after you pick up all the trash bags that are literally the entire apartment, the entire thing, below that was cat feces, right? I'm like, that's the bonus at the end for getting all the garbage out, right? 2 days of pulling out garbage to find out the entire floor is covered in that, right? But as we've changed our buildings, well, so as the sort of the bare tenancy. We don't deal a lot with the outskirts as much anymore, which means I don't know that we had an eviction at all in 2019, right? So it's just naturally less. And then part of me, is that right too, right? Is the bar too high? So I have a lot of internal struggles of the right way to do that and the right way to communicate it as well. So for us, because in a single family, we don't have a good relationship. So they're whole different things, right? I would say almost every single family resident has never met me, probably doesn't know who I am. They sign their lease electronically. They were moved in sometimes with a lockbox, generally with the leasing agent. But if it's on a Saturday and Memorial Day, right, sometimes even their move-in is, here's the lockbox code, right? It's very impersonal, right? So no one's walked them through the lease even. And I think we have this assumption that they read it, right? They have to initial every important part. We all know they haven't, right? So how do we properly explain the rules? I was thinking that just the other day, right? How do we walk through? And I'm thinking things like this, not in this format, but, video walkthroughs, right? So for the ones not there, hi, I'm your property manager. I just want to discuss a few things, right? Just send them a video, right? We communicate over text with a whole lot of residents now. And that is, I would say, one of the biggest differences because nobody reads emails anymore, right? Email's the new mail. You have so much of it, right? During this conversation, I bet I'll get 80 emails when I look at my phone again, right? That's hard to keep up with. But text, very immediate, right? And no one answers the phone either, right? So we text a lot. So if there is something, we had a building yesterday with a problem, 70 residents we had to notify. I could send them an email. That wouldn't work. We could wait for them to call. That wouldn't work. But we sent a text to them all, and that works. So trying to take what we learned from that, right, of modern ways to communicate. Also knowing that doesn't work everywhere. Texting everyone in my 55 plus building, probably not the way to do it. But there, it is community. The office is in a central area. They just walk down and they know each other. Yeah. My property manager in my 55 plus knows everyone there by name, right? 123 residents. Every time I go there, I'm amazed. Like they all just hug her as they see her and they have this great thing. But it's also my strongest building, right? 5-star reviews in everything they do all the time. I'm actually trying to learn, how do you take that and put it in a distributed environment? Mm-hmm. And it's different, but I think we have all these great things like we're doing right now of video, of text. So for a lot of how we do it, I think that's our goal. A lot more of bring information to them in a way they'll do it. And no one reads click-through agreements, and that includes leases. Sure. So my property manager is assuming people know the rules. That's one of the things I'm working on.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you always done leases electronically, or did you used to meet with tenants to go through the lease? Or
I'd say because of my background, right, we brought in technology day one. We were paperless day one. And our very first leases were paper. I love going back to see them. I'm like, thank goodness we never had to go to court, right? This terrible lease you Googled off the internet. Don't do that, right? That's but pretty quickly we went to electronic leases. First DocuSign, right, type stuff, and now it's a workflow in our software. I mean, it's all tracked in a clickable thing through our software. Very good for us, but is it best to make sure the resident knows? But my apartment communities is split. They can sign with an employee there, or they can electronic. So,
Okay.
And that's,
Nice. Okay. Now, what about working with your property owners? How do you balance the communication with them and really provide good, communication, good level of transparency about what's going on, and yet not, allow them to control you and get in too much into your business?
Yeah, and it's the same thing that I was saying about the rest, right? So a lot of my peers, and the way it's been ingrained in all of us, has always been, I don't ever want to hear from an owner, right? It's my job to do this. If they go near it, they'll break it, right? I think that's tough for me because I'm an investor, right? And to somehow, say that folks like me don't know what they're doing doesn't make sense, especially when the majority of people manage their own properties. And I teach those people to manage their own properties, and I have no problem with that, right? That how to do that is difficult. Now, the majority of the people that want us to manage do it because they don't want to deal with things. So it just naturally works, right? And so my job is just to communicate with each owner in the way they want it. And that's tough to do times thousands, right? Right now we're at, hundreds, and it's easier, right? But to scale that is tricky. So another thing you're trying to learn, right? But we have automatic communications for things that matter. Generally, maintenance is the biggest thing with an owner, right? It's outflow of money or money not coming in, right? That's the most communication they generally want, like something broke or your resident didn't pay, right? So we have workflows to communicate that part, and then more and more as we grow, as people realize, we want to help this be an investment. It's doing the more proactive of, hey, how about once a year we sit down and we go over this as an investment and see where you're at. And that to me is the biggest part that we're just rolling out. And that's what I'm excited about, right? Let's not just always talk about, you need new carpet or all that. Let's say over this year, what do we think the value of your building is now, right? What did you get in cash flow? What did you get in tax savings? What did you get in appreciation? If it's something other than a single family, based on cap rate, however we need to value it, but give them a valuation once a year. Not because we want them to sell, but what if we look and we see there's a bunch of equity, right? Maybe you should look to expand, right? There's no better feeling for me than my owners that add properties. I love that more. If you had one single family when you started with me and now you have 4, there's no better feeling. So that's the level of communication that I want to be proactive. We don't always have time to, just chat about basketball or football, whatever you're into, right? With our owners, you can't charge affordable prices and also staff to a point where we can talk for 4 hours with each owner. It doesn't work. So to me, we have ways to communicate the pain points, right? Which are mostly those two. And then, let's go over your portfolio, right? I'm here to handle your investment. So let's talk about that. So it's a good reminder that this isn't just a house that's losing money or making money, but it's a long-term thing.
Yeah. Well, you've said a few different things that kind of bring me to, why should a owner hire a manager? So we've talked about a lot of owners that self-manage and they like doing it. They know they're competent, and others who, don't care about it. They're busy doing their other job or whatever else. So what do you think the value is in bringing a property manager into the picture?
Sure. And there's 2 ways I have to approach this. And one is I always have to back them, what's their goal, right, is what matters, right? I know people that manage a smaller, a happy amount of properties for them, and that's what they want, which is fine. And I have to remind myself of that, right? Because I am a growth guy, so what I want from my portfolio is very different, right? I want constant, if there's a few things I learned from people, right? You never lose money in a deal you don't do. Kevin Atkins, he died in realty. I got to throw that out, right? So in my first early days, he was this real estate agent who said it. Now, I still don't know that I agree with it. Like, it bothers me to not win a deal, right? That's the competitive side in me. But he's like, if you did what, the idea is don't chase things, right? And we could go over stories where I've chased things and proven them right. But you also need to learn, all these other different. I'm getting far away from your question, and I don't want to do that. So you were asked specifically.
Just the role of a property manager.
And I would say, because some people can manage their own and they're happy. And to that, I say there's a reason I've chaired the Independent Owners Committee and I enjoy it. I honestly think some people can, but I know a lot of people can't. So the value of us are two things. One, if you really want to grow, you can't sit there and be that nuanced in your property and be the guy fixing the microwave and actually grow. You simply can't do it. So if your goal is to grow, and what I've learned now, if that's what makes you happy, God bless you, do it, right? But for most of us that are using this as an investment vehicle and want to grow it, that's what you'll get trapped in. You'll get trapped in this cycle, and you had one property, and 10 years later you have one property, and 20 years later you have one property. That's what happens if you don't have someone with experience looking at it, right? That's a huge thing. And then there's just the day-to-day, right? There's the obvious that we're there as a shield in a way, right? I got a fiduciary duty. So if something bad, right? Like I don't want to treat people poorly either, but back to there's rules, right? I can enforce the rules generally better than a lot of owners can. That is the number one. Owners come to us often. It's a mess, right? And it's my job to explain two things. One, yes, we can fix it. B, it's going to cost you money, right? At this point, you have a resident that owes you $8,000, probably did $8,000 in damage. I'm not going to fix this in 2 months, right? But we're going to talk in a year and see where we're at. And then we're going to talk in another year and see where we're at. And I'm like, it took you, a while to break it. It's going to take a while to fix it. But that's another key reason. And when you get to the larger properties, even when you get to apartments, having a full model of looking at the everything, we're usually better at it, right? I'm pretty good at understanding what we can get rents to, what we can do with expenses, and what that means to the value of your building, right? And that's where we can use evidence-based approach, right? I've done it with my own. I mentioned I bought a couple buildings. The first year we added over $1 million in equity to them, right? And that's what I do again and again, and that's what a property manager's job is, right? And the how you do it is some of the stuff we talked about, right? You got to treat the people right, but also the numbers. There's a whole lot, and one person tends to be good at one thing. I got brothers that are really good at fixing things. They'd be good at that. I'm really good with numbers. And as much as I believe in people, I'm not actually that great at it. I got to hire that, right? When you hire a property manager, you get all of those things. And every time I've run the numbers, you can make generally, unless you're really good at it, more money with a property manager than without. And that's the biggest thing. If at the end of the day, it's about the actual asset, what I've seen is yes, we cost money, but we generally make up that plus some. So that's the real reason to at least look at it for most people.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. The goals of that owner, if they want to grow or not, and what they want to spend their time on, and how efficiently do they want to operate their property.
Right.
So,
yep.
Very good. Hey everybody, I'm interrupting the show quick because I wanted to invite you to a special event that I'm hosting at the end of 2019. The end of the year is a great time to get together with friends and family to create new memories and even traditions. One tradition that my family has made over the last few years is volunteering at Feed My Starving Children. If you don't know what this organization is, you should definitely check out their website. It's fmsc.org. Basically, in a summary, they use volunteers to pack meals, and then they send those meals overseas to different people and or areas that are suffering from hunger and can really use a helping hand. I really like volunteering at Feed My Starving Children because it gives you a tangible way to give back, and it also creates discussion with my family and friends of how we can live a life of giving back and not just always being focused on ourselves. And so I've selected a date and I've reserved 50 spots. I'm hoping that you would help me fill one of those spots with yourself, your friends, and your family. This could be the tradition that you add this year and a great way to make memories with friends and family. So see the show notes where you'll find the date, the time, the location, and also a link where you can sign up and let us know that you're in. And with that, let's get back to the show. All right, so now I have a question from our audience.
All right.
Hi, I'm Timothy from Carver, Minnesota. Question I would have for you is, how do you find that technology is changing being a landlord in today's environment?
All right. I'm either the best or worst person for that, coming from a technology background, right? But it goes in a lot of ways, right? From what we get as tools, right? Whether you're an independent owner or using a landlord, it's all good, right? We have these amazing tools. Leasing a property, could it be easier, right? That used to be a major thing of putting something in the paper, of doing all this stuff. And now you have companies all the way down to automating signing up for a showing, all the way down to it just gives them a lockbox code and checks their ID, and the entire thing is automated. I mean, we have some crazy tools from technology. On the flip side, right, you get where, what point as a property manager, right, as a realtor, right, technology is trying to replace you, right? So it's the same thing. You got some big money being thrown into the property management industry. So what's it really going to do with that? I'm sure you, like me, believe there's still that people and that customer service and no technology. So because of my background, the scary negatives of it aren't generally what I focus on. So I would say to that, technology has just made our job a whole lot easier, right? Of being able to online portals, take payments online. We take something a little different because, again, a 55 plus building, but that one's 50%. But the rest of our portfolios around 90% pay the rent online. I mean, we don't even take money at two of our apartment communities. They either mail a check to Minneapolis or they pay online. But that leaves like 2 people at each building that mail in a check. That's a phenomenal use of technology. And I would say what's gotten better is if you are someone not using a big property manager, that those tools are now getting all the way down to free, as technology does. Now, are they sophisticated as what we use? No, but are they pretty darn good for someone managing 1 to 10 properties? Yeah, really, really good stuff. So I look at it, technology has made our jobs better in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree. There's so many ways that you can do things more efficiently with technology. I think the challenge sometimes is learning them and staying on top of everything that's coming at you, all the things that are available.
Right.
One kind of follow-up question to that is, what property management software have you found that's best for you?
Yeah. So how to get staff managed, you change software a lot, right? And so I've used 3, but one of them twice. So we've changed property management software 4 times. I have respect for most of them, and everything fits a given person. And small people, I'm like, there's things like Cozy that's out there for free. We use AppFolio. I have strong reasons we use it. I know people that violently oppose me on it. But the fact that I could pull up my phone, my tablet, my anything right now, I could sign a lease, I could do absolutely anything that's needed in my job. Between that and Google Drive, I have access to everything there is, right? People always then use the cliche on a beach, and the reality is I'm not going to be on a beach, I'm going to be working, but no matter where I'm working, I can pull it up, and that's important to me. So that software for a few things. We have integrated workflows in it and everything, so every person that moves in clicks off 20 tasks of what needs to get done. It's trackable and assigned to the right person in my company. Because like I say, this industry is a whole lot of simple things. I mean, it really is. And that's why people think it's easy. But if you miss one, the what can happen can be catastrophic, right? From now you're paying their electric bill for a year or 2. You're right. A small mistake on a lease can be a lawsuit. A small mistake on you forgot to ask them to do this, or you didn't follow the license with the city, or you didn't. Very small things cause big actions. So yeah, that's why I like it. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting what you said about these integrated workflows. And, can you tell us, for example, that as many as you could remember, what are the 20 things that happen when your tenant moves in?
Oh, I wish I could pull it up, but I've actually delivered. I used to do some presentations on technology for people that want to keep their day job, right, of the tools you can use. And one of them is I would just pop up what our move-in workflow looks like. And the entire slide is just filled with steps, right? And the whole point is to look overwhelming. But the reason is because it doesn't matter how small it is, right? If it could be missed, I want it on there. So it isn't that you're doing a whole lot of magic, right? But, everything from the keys, right? If we're doing a turn, right, there's three things in there, right? There's a move out, there's a turn, and there's a move in. And so making sure you efficiently do all that in there, that you get all the inspections done, that maintenance is scheduled, that everything is done from making copies of keys if you need them, to marking where the keys are, to, again, verifying rental licenses, to, just the basics of scheduling all this. And especially once you scale, right? I always say you can do a whole lot of stuff. If your goal is just to be a mom and pop, you don't need a lot of these tools because the knowledge will be in your head. It's the first day it has to be somewhere other than your head, that if that's the way you ran things, you're going to struggle, right? Because no one will know how to do anything. The idea for us to document workflows means I can bring someone in. It makes us scalable. It means if Julie, I don't have a Julie, so I made up a name, left us, that we wouldn't not know what to do because everything's in Julie's head, right? So once you're trying to be, there's a reason a McDonald's is successful. You might hate their food, right? But I've been to McDonald's in several countries of the world, and it's all the same. You only get that level of consistency, not from great employees, because let's face it, McDonald's not known probably for the highest quality employees, right? But it's their systems and processes that are so well defined you can't mess it up. Yeah. And that's the idea. So the specifics of what they are is funny, because even before I came here, I'm working with one of my assistant property managers, because we redo them constantly. Every time you make a mistake or something doesn't go right, you go back and edit it. And that's, again, part of the experience, right? After 12 years of making mistakes, right, we get it down pretty good. But we're still making changes all the time. But the what is just everything you could think of that you could get wrong, from signing that lease to filling out the right boxes in that lease, to saving that lease, for us to Google Drive, to archiving it where it belongs, to making sure it's shared with the resident. Just think of every tiny step. Each one's a click box, and we can then put metrics against it, right? It should take this long. It took this long, and you can improve. And that, for us, we have to balance customer service with efficiency, right? Because owners don't want to pay us all their money, right? And I don't blame them, right? If you spend $1 million on a property, you don't want to put all that profit back into us so we can have just billions of employees doing every little thing. So we have to be incredibly efficient.
Yep. That list is so important, even beyond those people that want to scale up, because what happens when you pass away prematurely,
right,
and you're left to your wife or your spouse and all the heirs, very often that transition period can be really confusing. I mean, not to mention all the emotional stuff that's going on, but if the business is suddenly going sideways because nobody knows where the keys are,
right,
where the leases are, who to call for what, it can be a complete mess.
Oh yeah, I like the prime example, because I've been through it. It's every time you get handed a bank-owned property, right? Because you were given nothing except a box of keys. Good luck, right? You don't even know where the leases are, or if you have any. There's zero process. The residents don't know what to expect, and it is chaos for a long time. So you're right. I always use the example that mom and pop is less important, but you're right. What if that the hit by a bus thing, right? Example you always got to use in a business. What happens if I get hit by a bus? It's fine, right? If my own investments, if I were gone, my wife is not involved in the company, but it wouldn't matter, right? It's all there. The process is there. It's documented, and you're right. It's very important for a lot of reasons.
Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to focus on the value of the property. As you touched on, it's the income minus the expenses. So what are ways that you as a property manager have helped your owners find income that they didn't have before?
Sure. Right. And it's hard to give an answer that's clever to this, right? Because it's always, raise the rent or save money, right? And you can't save money in most of the expenses. I mean, you can shop insurance, but where you don't want is the cheapest insurance. So it's not the, you want the right insurance for the best price. It's like everything. And you certainly property taxes, right? And so you're down to things like maintenance, right? And that's where I always go back to. So for us, we own a maintenance company. That's how we control it. It's super important. It probably is the biggest variable, right? If one of our owners if especially if single family, right? We're talking now. If anything changes for them, it's maintenance every time, because everything else is the same. They literally get to the point they expect the same check in their account every month, like it's a paycheck. So for one, I'd argue that's a bad way to look at an investment, because I can tell you the stock market, there's dividends, but they're not sending you a check every month for investing in it, right? But when you get to multifamily, then it's a whole different game, and it's a little, or even when you scale single family, because then you really can make a 10% difference that does something substantial, right? And I look at it again back to what I try to explain to folks in my company. It's like, what happens if rents go up $10 a month on this 100-unit property, right? And they're like, you make $1,000, right? For those that can do a little bit of math, right? Good. How much is that a year? 12,000. All right. What does that mean to the property, right? And I think it's I actually tried to look it up earlier, so I'd memorize this, but it's like at a cap rate of 7, it's about $172,000 or something to the value of the building. $10, right? Trivial amount. You had $172,000 to the value of a building. That's, to me, the important part, and that helps people think of the long term, right? So, what can I do to, stop losing money this month? Well, maybe nothing, right? Because every action you take might take a while, right? Can you get higher rents, right? Well, if you're below market, yeah, and that's back to, where a property manager is usually a little better at that. I have no problem raising rents. I have problem with charging unfair rents, which usually only happens in the lowest segment, right? That sort of abusive rents, right? And I don't agree, and I won't manage that. But normally, right, you want at market, and I don't really care. I mean that in the nicest way possible, that Sally's been an amazing resident for 15 years. I would too if I was paying half of market rent, right? You gotta jump it up, and you don't jump it up $10. Put it at market, right? And odds are Sally will stay, because odds are she knows, right? If you've been taking care of her in every other way, people are willing to pay the fair price. And so that's the biggest part, is just rent is the easiest lever, right? And my problem is it can sound bad, right? And it can play off bad on all this stuff taken out of context. Like you're just squeezed more and more and more. And we're well aware, it's part of our mission statement, that residents pay up to 50% of their income towards what we do, and I take great responsibility in it. But it's like everything, it's about balance and fairness and everything else, right? You want market rents at market rents. So we bought a building every 2 of the 3 buildings I bought, we raised rents essentially as soon as we got them, because they were below market. It didn't cause a mass exodus or panic or all that, right? Some grumbling, yeah. But I say the same thing. I'm like, you know why they're not going to leave? Because it's still the fair price, right? What you were doing before didn't work. And you had one resident paying $500 a month and another one paying $800 for the same unit. I'm like, how is that fair then? Like that doesn't bother you? That $300 disparity? Like that bothers me more than telling everyone to pay $800, But that's the easiest. And, the lowering expenses, like I said, there aren't a ton of things you can do. There are smart things you can do, right? If your water bill's too high, right? Figure out why, right? You can even argue property taxes, right? I mean, we work with some great lawyers. If the property taxes are unfair, you don't have to accept that, right? If they're truly unfair. If the fact you don't like pay property taxes, that's on you, right? But if your actual property is off, I've won those when you fight them. I mean, there's a process for all that, and you got to just not be afraid and know the right contacts. But the normal is like what I said. It's looking at long term, because maybe there's an addition, a repair, something major, some kind of capital improvement you can do that will pay itself back in 3 years. So for 3 years, it might not be great, but year 4, 5, 6, right? It's gravy. So if you can think that long term, I have a good example. I had a 20-unit building I bought in Baldwin, Wisconsin, and unit 20 was studs in concrete. It had flooded once with the previous owners, and they didn't want to spend the money to do anything about it. And I'm sure they just looked at it as like, this is $20,000. And that's a good chance to explain to people. I'm like, okay, so the rent's $1,000. So they're losing $12,000 a year to not spend 20. What's the payback, right? A year and a half, and after that, they make $12,000 a year, which is I think I came to close to the same thing, right? It's nearly $200,000 at a 7 cap in value to the building. So of course I did that, and then I sold the building, right? I mean, why wouldn't you do that? So it's in summary, right? You got the easy, right? Raise rent, make sure your market, be fair. There's some expenses you control, maintenance being the biggest one. And again, you either work with a property manager with good relationships that works with the vendor enough to get good prices, or owns the maintenance company. We do both. And then it's, to me, the fun stuff is the big stuff, right? We've added washers and dryers to units that didn't have them before. It was a big CapEx, but if it gets you $200 rent increase, right? What's the payoff? Everything we do, right? What's the payback? And if it's 3 years, it's a no-brainer. If it's 5 years, it's smart for a lot of people. If it's 20 years, don't do it, right? And those are the things.
Okay. Diving into one of those areas, the utilities, what do you recommend as a way to really analyze, say, your water bill or just everything combined to make sure that you aren't losing something?
Yeah, and it's I see now I got so funny story. See, I have my property that not only did I find out was flooding a couple days ago, right? And you got to deal with that. It turned out we thought it was flooding from all the rain because it's got a crawl space, but it turned out no. My water heater in the crawl space had a leak. So I was paying for the water to heat the water to dump it into a sump pump to flood my building. That's, you got to catch stuff like that, right? So part of it is that, right? You got to have, our maintenance techs know if they're out there, whether you've used the dye tablets or whatever, right? Look, if the water's swirling in the tank, it doesn't matter if you hear it even, right? A leak can be subtle. But water's mostly leaks, right? Sometimes it's just management, right? We had a high water usage. You go out and you see they have a pool. That's not okay, right? Back to understand your lease. You can't just use the owner's water to fill your pool, plus the insurance liability of the pool, right? Not a kiddie pool, bigger pool, right? That's the main thing. But also, if utilities, if you're an apartment or something, right, you can look at things like RUBS, depending on the market and the legality. But I think in Minnesota and Wisconsin, I believe it's both legal. And build some of that back. We have an apartment building where we just started adding it on. So the rent was still the same amount, but there was a RUBS charge of that gas. What was it, $2,500 a month gas charge? I think a small building. But that's $2,500. Well, we recouped all of that. It was a huge value for the building. So I would look at billing back utilities. Now, I'm scared to do that because with small owners, sometimes they do things they can't do. You got to be real careful of common elements, right? If you have a single hallway that has a light bulb that gets billed back to a resident and that gets back to Excel will bill all that electricity back to you, right? So that's my public service. Be real careful and know what you're doing with utilities and the law, because you cannot not disclose and charge someone for any common area utility. But the rest is check for leaks. RUBS is a good thing, are the two I have.
Yeah, and with RUBS, aside from checking the legality, it's just also the marketability of it. Is everybody else in your market doing that or not? Right. So.
Yeah, and part of it, I always say, I don't like tricky stuff, but most people shop on things based on rent price, and they don't notice all those other things. I wish they would, right? In a way, a rent thing would be more fair if it said average utilities and you saw what the all-in actually probably is, right? Because a $1,000 place with included heat and $1,000 with electric heat are very different actual costs. But I can tell you, if someone looking on Zillow or Craigslist, all they see is the $1,000. So RUBS will usually play in an owner's favor. I don't necessarily like it, but I found most people aren't sophisticated enough to think through the utilities hours. But yeah.
What about proactively doing maintenance, or maybe identifying some type of product that is just more long-lasting than another? Have you found any kind of strategies with that to reduce expenses in the future? Yeah, so it's this is another one of those fun, multifamily versus single family, and everything's harder in single family. Sorry, right? It's where we all start. Some people stay there. Some people own tons of single family because, it's a whole different way it's valued in the end, right? So if you feel that appreciation is going to be your moneymaker, great. But it's harder to do, right? To think of some of that stuff because
mostly then you have to put in the fixtures and the equipment that matches what the house is, right? In apartments, yeah, you could put in the cheapest toilet on earth, or you can put in a good one, and I can tell you win with the good one. And the answer is usually still somewhere in the middle. You'll answer with the right one, right? Paying a whole gob of money for that extra 1%, right? It's fun for rich people, but it's not a good way to do things. But also the bottom stuff is often crap, right? Anyone who thinks everything's the same, even in a toilet, right? It's not true, right? The cheapest ones, you're just going to have problems. And problems with the toilet, no one wants it. Whether it's leaking or clogging or whatever it is, it's going to be a nightmare for you, right? So thinking further ahead is usually better. Flooring materials, probably the biggest one and the biggest change, right? Probably in our industry, right? All of us got sick of replacing carpet, right? So you're seeing vinyl planking everywhere. And the great thing about vinyl planking is it looks good and it holds up better. Like it's a win-win. It's a win for the resident. It's a win for the owner. So there's a quick one, right? If you're still installing a lot of carpet, vinyl planks, put carpet in the bedroom or carpet somewhere, right? You don't want the place cold looking or cold feeling, but that look of planks is just a really good one. And that stuff, you get double the longevity of your carpet at least. So That's a good one. Yeah.
Yep, nice. That's been really popular.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what's your role as a manager during the acquisition or disposition of your owners, of the properties that your owners have, especially as you're also an investor? So do the owners ever consider you maybe competition, or, how do you see your role in that?
Yeah, it's funny because I have never been asked that since like our first year, I feel like I didn't even remember it, except when people bring it up, and it's usually a peer or someone that brings it up. So I don't feel owners have issue with it. And they shouldn't, of course. I explain it two ways. One, well, now my properties aren't near most of what we manage. But two, I don't manage any of them. My company does, right? So there'll never be any kind of different treatment. It wouldn't make sense, right? As far as on the sales side, right, I am a broker. I have agents, but we're not a brokerage, which means generally we don't get involved unless they want us to. Now, have I sold properties for my owners? Yeah, I will. Of course I will. But it's not a primary. And it's only because sorry, I said, I'm an investor. If they want my knowledge and they don't have someone, right, I'm happy to help them. But we don't strongly market it because same thing, right? You're good at what you do. I'm good at what I do. And I don't want to mess something up, right? So at the same point, if they want an opinion on the investment side, same thing, or just an opinion who to work with. That's what I'd say. Like all realtors aren't the same, just like all property managers aren't the same. So if you're selling an investment, please, right, get someone that handles investments, or they're just going to throw it in the MLS next to a house and not know why they're not getting what they want, right? They're different. But if they want help, coming up with, like I told you, once a year, like the idea of coming out and going, this is what we think your investment is worth, right? We see their expenses, the majority of them, not everything, but enough, and we can fill in the rest. So more than anyone, we have a good idea of value, right? And that's something I do. So short answer, right? So it really, like everything, it just depends.
Sure.
Most the selling and buying I directly work with are my own stuff. And even that is just because when you start getting into apartments, it's mostly off market, and it's just a whole nother animal.
Sure.
And that's another thing, right? There's a place I'll help someone, right? If it's something that's just off market. But if you're looking to sell your home on the MLS, if you want us to help you, great. But just know it's not our wheelhouse, right? Here's the best way I can say it. I'm selling my former home right now, and I used another company to list it, which that takes a bit of swallowing of your pride to go, I'm a broker in this city, but I'm not the most qualified to sell my own home, and I'm not. So that's the thing. I'm part of the team. And if you're selling a single family, usually we're out of it. If you're selling a single family just into the single family market, usually we're out of the whole process right away. We let the realtor take over. We usually will end the contract because it's just people stepping on each other. If it's an investment based, then it's usually a whole different thing.
And then what about if somebody maybe is coming into the market here wanting to buy something, 50 unit building, and they want to kind of talk to you about what should they expect for income and expenses at any given property. Do you go on property tours with them, even if maybe some cases they have their own agent or some cases they don't, but how do you advise them going into a market for the first time?
Yeah, so there's two ways. So the tours less often. I will because it's fun. I'm not going to lie, right? That's the one time I'm jealous of realtors, right? What is the most fun part, right? Property tours. It's like that. It's like Disneyland if you're a real estate geek, right? It's fun, right? But the best part to give me is the numbers, right? That's what I want, right? Give me a trailing 12 and some actuals, because I mean this in the nicest way, standing next to someone who works primarily on the brokerage side. The numbers you probably got from the realtor probably aren't good. They're very rosy, so they are good, but they aren't realistic, right? So I'm someone, give me at least a trailing 12. Ideally, if it's a bigger thing, I want the last three. And the difference is they don't have to look good, right? I mean, I've taken properties from crap and 3 years made them good. So I don't care that year 3 looks bad, but I have enough experience to see that picture and to advise. So that's probably my biggest strength, and I will do that gladly for someone, even if they're working with another broker.
Nice. Okay, well, that is the majority of my questions on kind of management and such.
Sure.
I want to ask you to look into your crystal ball.
All right.
That I know we all don't really have, but based on your experience with how quickly properties are getting rented and any concessions that are required nowadays, what's your projection going into this fall or next year? We've got a crazy election coming up here. Yeah. But based on your experience, what's really going to happen with the rental market?
Yeah, so it's funny. I have a peer who's delivering a speech next month on that topic, and I love listening to it. I'm not a big crystal ball person, but I can tell you. So here's both sides of it. Rental market, the entire time I've been in it, it's been good. So I'm a little, I started in the recession, and even in the recession, values were terrible, but were the renters? Yeah. Tons of them, right? Everyone lost their house. Of course, there's renters. So we've had this strong market where rents continue to go up. They can't go up forever. So there is, you feel the change in that because governments will get involved if it keeps going, right? So I wouldn't buy anything and think, it's just going to go into the stratosphere. Now, will something terrible happen, right? The trick is it's a global world now. So the terrible that could happen could come quicker than, and anything that's a 50-50 chance, right? Everyone's going to say, or no. I've been self-employed my whole life. I've never cared who's in power or what's going on when I make a decision, and I still operate that way, and I recommend it. If it's a good deal now, it's a good deal. If you ever buy something and you think because it's going to appraise into the wazoo and that's all it has going for it, that's a bad idea at the bottom and a bad idea at the top. Just don't do that sort of investment, right? That's just going to Vegas, right? And if that's what you're into, great, but just know it is what it is. So a stable, there's not going to become a sudden world where people aren't renting anymore. Now, we used to say in our side that millennials will never buy, and then they started buying, right? So it's back to no extremes are right. So yeah, my crystal ball, if you find a good deal, still buy it. I bought more in the last, 14 months than I've bought in my life. And some would argue we're about to fall. At the same time, I just sold all my stocks. So am I nervous? Maybe, but not on rental investment. And that's because if you understand it enough or work with someone that is, you won't make a bad buy. And then you're in good shape.
Good stuff. Okay, and as we wrap up here, I want to just give the audience a little more chance to get to know you personally.
Sure.
And so, can you tell us why you get up in the morning?
Yeah, see, that's a tricky question because I'm a night person. So you should say what keeps you up all night, but that's usually considered a negative. But on a personal level, right? I got a wife and kids and family and all the things that really matter in life, right? And hopefully we can all say that, whether it's a wife and kids, but just some real thing, right? Some concrete. Like I love my kids. I love my wife. I love life, right? I like good food. I like, I like boating, I like hockey, right? But on a professional level, I just enjoy, I enjoy two things. I enjoy investment. I love watching, we didn't go the whole thing, but my properties didn't make money for like 6 years. I never took a penny out of them, right? And that's why when I say it's a long game, it's because I did live it, right? I had people not pay rent. I had to evict. I had times people owed me so much money it was scary, right? I would take cash because at least they were giving me something, right? You went through all this crazy stuff, right? And all the stories that I have trouble coming up with now, right? That's when they happened, right? But you saw through it, and you didn't give up, and you didn't sell out, and then you exchange into something. I would take a dozen duplexes and put them into one better building. And you do that a few times, and then suddenly you're in a 20 unit. And then because you bought that down here, there's enough equity. Like I said, we're up to 290 now versus, I don't know how many we ever had, but 60 or something, without really having to keep putting more money into it. That's a phenomenal thing. And I thoroughly enjoy that part, and explaining and teaching it. It's a passion. On the management side, it's bringing it. It's everything I mentioned earlier. That it's about people, and I'm everyone's just vilifying everything. Everything's left, right, and red, blue, and all this. And I think there's a movement. I think enough people agree with me of I'm done with that. Like residents aren't terrible. Owners aren't terrible, right? They don't want to spend money. They break everything. He doesn't want to pay for anything, right? No, we all want the same thing, right? And we're all different, right? So we're not going to be the same, right? But solving that problem, that's my passion. And I'm not going to say I have it solved. I don't. But that's actually what keeps me up at night, is trying to solve that.
That's great, because I was just thinking recently with the discussion about the ordinances that Minneapolis is putting into place, and I went to that hearing recently, and just seeing the adversity or animosity, I don't know what the right word is, but the two sides conflicting there. And I was like, guys, we all want the same thing.
Right.
We all want safe, affordable housing, right?
Right.
So, yeah, if we can find out how to communicate that and how to make it happen.
Yeah, and I have been proud of my peers and what they did in that. And I watched two sides, two groups. I'm at one that isn't from the area, just complaining on the internet about it, and the other that was there with you at the table and maybe didn't get exactly what we want, right? We don't have perfection at all, right? But we're talking and we're working, and just because day one you didn't get there, that if you keep doing that, it's the same thing. I didn't make money for 6 years. Like, there's no fast fix to this, right? So I love the idea, and I'm glad you were there, and everyone that is there for that, and not there just to complain or to hold up a picket sign, but to talk. Like, you want what I want, what you want. It's just not that easy, we can't build affordable housing as developers, so how do we solve it, right? Yeah.
Okay, next question is, what is a person or event in your history or your that was really pivotal to help you become who you are today?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I have a complicated history. I feel like I've lived 30 lives, so it's good. I mean, you're affected by everyone around you, but I've been every story, right? I've been poor, where you're living in neighborhoods where you're getting robbed, and I've been had where I felt like the system's working against you, and there was no way out, and you whatever it is, you find your way out, right? And that story, right, of being able to do it, at the same time realizing it's not, I got lucky in so many ways, and I'm so conscious of that in everything I do. But you're affected from teachers, you're affected from mentors. I still have people in the industry that I love to talk to, that mostly they don't think the same way as me, but you respect them. That's the most important thing, right? So the people that affect me the most are that they're not just like me, because you can find that, and then you find you're just agreeing on everything. And you're like, and all you can do is just get mad at the other then, right? Because you all agree, so they must be stupid, right? It's when you find that person that can earn your respect, that doesn't think like you. Those are the people, and they're they're a more rare find that you tend to remember. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and as we wrap things up here, if anybody wants to get in touch with you to talk about property management,
Sure.
What's the best way that they can reach you?
Yeah, the best way is email. I'll be honest. I'm a tough guy on the phone, and I don't mean to be. I'm just busy. So it's just Curt, C-U-R-T, at investpm.com. Our website's investpm.com. If you're really sophisticated and fun, if you use Calendly, right? So people that know that, you go to Calendly/investpm-Curt. Then you can actually just set up a meeting with me right there. Again, I keep my calendar pretty full, so you can find a time, and I'm happy to video chat with anyone. It doesn't matter if you're even going to work with me. If you're in the industry, it's fun for me. So.
Nice. Well, Curt, I really appreciate you coming in. Drove in all the way from Hudson.
Sure, no problem.
So I want to give you a small gift here. I got a little mug here.
Oh, thank you
very much. And I want to ask you, what are you going to put in there? Coffee or hot chocolate or what?
Yeah, vodka. Is that right? The answer? Yeah. It's going to be a combination of coffee or scotch, depending on the time of the day. How's that?
All right.
But I do like coffee. So.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again, Curt. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you got anything out of this, we'd like to know that you're listening. So go ahead and comment on the YouTube video. You can comment on iTunes. You can give us a rating and review. And also, as you notice, we have a question from the audience. We'd like to get more of those. So if you've got a burning question for your managing your own properties, please go ahead and look in the show notes. You'll see some instructions for how to submit your question. So thank you so much. Until next time, make it a great one.
All right. Thank you.
The opinions shared on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a solicitation for representation or investment in any specific offering. Please consult with your financial, legal, tax, and real estate advisor before making any investment decisions. John Stiles is a licensed Minnesota real estate agent with Bridge Realty. Thanks for tuning in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. If you're considering scaling up, downsizing, or right-sizing your real estate investment portfolio, it's important to know how to determine your property's value in today's market. That's why I've put together a free ebook for you called How to Calculate Your Investment Property's Value. To get your copy, go to www.realestatestyles.com/value. Now, if you found any value in today's show, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast through your favorite podcast player. All the links are in the show notes. And would you do me a big favor? Help me get the word out about this show by sharing with your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn. And lastly, we appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. I really appreciate you and wish you the best in your real estate investing career. Signing off, I'm John Stiles with Bridge Realty. Make it a great day.